am Dr. Sonal from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. In this series of forensic science lecture, today we are going to talk about organizational setup, forensic laboratories and institution. In this lecture, we will talk about how different forensic science laboratories came into India, how they were set up, in which year they were set up, and from the individual laboratories, they became a hub of all the departments of forensic science laboratories. A very famous Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has said, whenever you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So, that is the basis of forensic science. Forensic science, which we have also discussed earlier, it has come from the Latin word forensic, which means of a form, place of assembly. So, it is the application of science to the matters of criminal and civil law. Whenever there is any case related to any criminal activity or any civil activity, the science which is applied to solve such queries, that science is forensic science. Forensic science is basically an applied sciences which is multidisciplinary in nature and multidimensional in nature, which uses all the concepts of physics, chemistry, biology, entomology, all the different sciences to solve the queries or to solve the cases or the matters which are related to any criminal activity or any civil activity. So, the concept behind the forensic science is whenever two objects, whether animate or inanimate, microscopic or macroscopic, in whichever physical state they come in contact with each other, there would be an exchange of materials. These materials are known as the physical evidences. Forensic science essentially deals with the laboratory examination of different types of physical evidence encountered at the scene of crime. And these physical evidences are always preferred over human witnesses because evidence can never lie, but humans can. So, whenever we see forensic science, it can be viewed as a tripartite structure which consists of three things. The first thing is the collection of evidences, the second thing is examination of those evidences, and the third is the presentation in the court of law. So, whenever there is a crime committed, the forensic investigator team, it goes to the crime scene, it collects the evidences from the crime scene after a thorough investigation. Then those collected evidence, following a chain of custody, they goes to the forensic science laboratory for the examination. Various forensic scientists, they analyze the evidences in different branches. Depending upon what kind of evidence is found at the crime scene, it will go to that specific branch of the particular in the forensic lab, and finally, whatever the report will be there, that will be presented at the court of law. So, now how the history and development of forensic science in India started. The application of science and technology to the detection and investigation of crime and administration of justice is not new to India. Our ancestors did not know forensic science in its present form. Scientific methods in one way or the other seem to have been followed in the investigation of crime. Although in the previous times or in the previous era, the investigation which was followed by our ancestors, by Indian various ancestors, they has followed a particular method for investigation of particular crime, but they did not name it as forensic science. There are many references which are found in Kautilya's Arthashastra, which is written about almost 23,000 years ago. Indians at that time, they have studied various patterns of the papillary lines thousands of years ago, and it is presumed that they knew about the persistency and individuality of fingerprints which they used as signatures. So, till date today, we have found references in many old books which are thousands of years old, that the fingerprints have been used as a method of investigation by our different ancestors. So, Indian knew for long that the handprints known as the Tarija were immutable. That means the fingerprints are unique to each and every person. It was well known to our ancestors thousands of years ago, and the use of fingerprints as signatures by illiterate people in India is introduced centuries ago and was considered by some people as ceremonial only until it was scientifically proved that identification from fingerprints was infallible. That means if we have taken fingerprints of any person, it will not change with time and it will not be similar to any other person. Although some people, illiterate people used to think that they are giving fingerprints because they could not sign or they do not know how to write. But later on, as the scientific technology is developed, it was well versed that the fingerprint is individuality of that particular person, like signature of that particular person. So, taking the gist out of it, the science which was methodologically taken by the Indians for an investigation was not new to our ancestors, but later on this science was developed in India. The very first laboratory was developed, it was known as the Chemical Examiner's Laboratory. During the 19th century, when the cases of death due to poisoning posed a problem to the law enforcement agencies, a need was felt for isolating, detecting and estimating various poisons absorbed in the human system. So, when in the year 1849, a lot of poisoning cases were coming and there was a necessity for the scientist to examine what was the reason of these poisoning cases. So, to start that or to estimate those poisons absorbed by the human body, the first ever chemical examiner's laboratory was set up for this purpose at Madras Presidency under the Department of Health during the year 1849. So, the sole purpose of this laboratory, which was set up at the Madras Presidency, was to isolate, detect and estimate different poisons which were absorbed by the human body and which were causing death due to poisoning. Later on, similar laboratories were set up at Calcutta in the year 1853, followed by one each at Agra in the year 1864 and Bombay in the year 1870. So, all these laboratories were equipped to handle toxicological analysis of viscera, biological analysis of stains of blood, semen, etc., and chemical analysis of food, drugs and various accessible materials to provide scientific support to the criminal justice delivery system within their limited means. These laboratories also provide analytical facilities to the neighboring states and the union territories. So, as the first chemical examiner lab was set up at the Madras Presidency and 3 more labs were opened in Calcutta, Agra and Bombay. After that, starting with for the poisoning cases, this chemical examiner laboratory came into being, but then a need arose for the identification of the persons. A person can be identified by the way he looks. So, an Anthropometric Bureau was set up for this. While some progress was made in the identification of poisons, the identification of people, specifically criminals, was still being done in a rather haphazard manner. So, policemen would try to memorize convict's face so that they could recognize him if he got involved in another crime later. But with the introduction of photography, the CID, Crime Investigation Department, maintained records of every known criminal, including a detailed description of his appearance. So, with the invention of Bertillon's anthropometric system in the year 1878, India, along with the other countries of the world, adapted this Bertillon system of personal identification and thus an Anthropometric Bureau for maintaining Anthropometric Records of Criminals was established in the year 1892 at Calcutta. So, following the lines of Bertillon's anthropometric system, on the similar lines, an Anthropometric Bureau was opened in the year 1892, where they started keeping records of the persons who were convicted earlier or who have committed crimes earlier. So, they used to keep the photographs of those persons, and they used to take the measurements, the bodily measurements of a person who was convicted earlier. For example, they used to take the height of the person, the length of the arms, the length of the legs, the facial features and the photograph, just to keep a record of a person who has been convicted earlier or who has committed a crime earlier, to maintain that in the system. So, that was the role of Anthropometric Bureau, which was opened in the year 1892, set up in the Calcutta city of India. The next thing which was developed very fast was the Fingerprint Bureau. The collector of the district of Hooghly, William Herschel, he found that the markings on the fingertips of a person never changed during the lifetime, that the fingerprints which are present on person's finger are persistent in nature. Herschel applied his knowledge and skill in devising a system of registration of finger or thumb impression of native contractors to safeguard the interest of the government against the repudiation of contracts by them. Therefore, he extended his registration procedure to prison regulations for identifying convicted criminals. Firstly, when the fingerprints were being collected, those fingerprints were collected or the finger or thumb impressions were taken for the native contractors, but later on these fingerprints were taken for the persons who were in the prisons for identification of the convicted criminals. So, after William Herschel in the year 1891, Edward Richard Henry's appointment, the Inspector General of Police in Bengal, he introduced the thumb impressions in the record slips containing the anthropometric data to avoid wrong identification. So, now what they have done, whatever anthropometric data we were having from the Anthropometric Bureau, where we have the picture of the person, where we have his bodily measurements, alongside that they have also added one more slip containing the fingerprint impressions and thumb impressions of that person. So, now we have the full data along with the anthropometric data and the fingerprint data. So, long before 1897, he introduced maintenance of duplicate criminal records with impressions of 10 fingers separately. It was Henry's idea to take in all the fingerprints of the person to make the system more successful. Today also we are following the Henry's single digit classification and Henry's 10 digit classification, where we take fingerprints of all our 10 fingers of hands together and separately, which can help in identification of a criminal. The first fingerprint bureau in the world was officially declared open at Calcutta in July 1897. So, the first fingerprint bureau which was developed or opened in India was the first fingerprint bureau all over the world. And from here only they started taking the 10 digit classification of criminals, which is even followed till now by the fingerprint bureaus of different world which are settled in different parts of the world. Now, the next department which was set up was the Department of Explosives. The need of this department, the use of explosives or the activities, they became very common, and thus it was found necessary to detect the cause of explosion, whether the explosion which was made was either accidental or intentional. The foundation of the Department of Explosives was laid when the first Chief Inspector of Explosives was appointed in the year 1898 with its headquarters at Nagpur. So, Explosives Department was first established in the year 1898 at Nagpur. Later on, the 5 regional offices were opened, one at Calcutta, one at Bombay, Agra, Madras, Gwalior, and 3 sub offices at Shivkashi, Gomia and Asansol, they were opened. They developed competence to provide scientific clues in respect of explosives as well as the possible causes of explosion. Their expertise came handy in police investigations in the crime related to explosions and for evolving various provisions under the Explosives and Petroleum Act. So, together the first center when it was opened at Nagpur and the other centers when they were opened at Calcutta, Bombay, Agra, Madras and Gwalior, together all these centers they develop the expertise where they will analyze all the explosive materials, and after the analysis of explosive materials, these centers give us the report to know what were the composition of explosives, what was the whether the explosion was intentional or it was an accidental explosion. So, keeping all these tests, they developed a very high competence to give us scientific clues and evidences where the cases related to explosives were being solved. The major reason of development of this explosives department, because the Quit India movement also started in the year 1800s and 1900s, and the Britishers they developed the need to analyze to know which explosions or which explosive materials are being used by Indians to create or for that intentional explosions. Then they opened another division, which is the Government Examiner of Question Document Shimla. The British government of Bengal, they felt the necessity of identifying the handwritings on the secret documents connected with the Indian independence movement and therefore created the post of Government Handwriting Expert of Bengal. So, the government handwriting expert, they identify the secret documents, they analyze the secret documents which were related to the Indian independence movement. The Government Examiner of Question Document Shimla was Mr. C.R. Hardless. He was the then superintendent in the AG's office in Bengal. He was appointed to this post in the year 1904 and this setup was shifted to Shimla in the year 1906 and was placed under the control of the director CID. A post of handwriting expert for the Government of India was created and Mr. C.R. Hardless was appointed to this post. The person who is being appointed to this post, the name of the department was also GEQD, Government Examiner of the Question Document, and the person who is applied at this post, the name of the post was also the GEQD, Government Examiner of Question Documents, Junior, Senior. So, after Mr. Hardless, he was replaced by Mr. F. Brewster, who also was a police officer from the West Bengal CID and was designated as the GEQD. At first, the work of his office was mainly confined to the identification of writings on the secret documents, but later on his work increased to the application of this branch of science was fell in many other cases. The service of this office was also thrown open to criminal as well as civil court cases. In fact, during the World War II, this organization took up the additional work of secret censorship, including the detection of invisible writings and training of military personnel in this field of science. Now, the next department which opened was the serologist to the Government of India. Serologist word came from the word serology. So, when the science of examining human blood developed in India, it became possible to examine blood and seminal stains in criminal investigation. Realizing the importance of forensic serology, an institute named as Serology Department was established in Calcutta in the year 1910. The Serology Institute they used to examine all the biological materials, they used to examine blood, serum, uh, and other biological fluids, for example, saliva, semen, vaginal fluid, etc., and all the cases which are related with the biological fluids. So, the head of this institute was designated as Imperial Serologist to the Government of India, Dr. Hanking, which helped in the establishing of this department. So, this department was opened in the Calcutta in the year 1910. Though the scientific techniques for serological examination were at the infancy stage, this institute provided valuable scientific support by analyzing biological materials for crime investigation. After independence, the department was named as Office of the Serologist and Chemical Examiner to the Government of India. The next department after the serology department which was opened was the footprint section of CID or Criminal Investigation Department. So, during the year 1915, a footprint section was established under the CID, Government of Bengal, which helped the police authorities to identify criminals through the examination of footprints which were collected from the scene of crime. So, whatever footprints which were collected by the CID from the scene of crime, they were investigated under this footwear section or footprint section of CID in the year 1915. So, after that in the year 1917, a currency forgery section was also opened in the Criminal Investigation Department. It was also set up under the CID, Government of Bengal, to undertake the examination of forged currency notes. The Revenue Department also started its own laboratory for identification of opium and narcotics, liquor analysis and estimation of purity levels of precious metals like gold, silver, etc. So, the section which was opened under CID, firstly they opened a footprint section, and then in the year 1917 they opened a currency forgery section, and also the Revenue Department of the CID, they developed another section which was analyzing a part of drugs and also the precious materials. So, similarly, government, mint and security printing departments at Nasik also established their own laboratories for detection of cases of counterfeit and forged currency notes. Then in the year 1930, Ballistics laboratory was developed, an arms expert was appointed and a small ballistic laboratory was set up under the Calcutta police to deal with the examination of firearms. As the menace of firearms grew, other state CIDs also established small ballistic laboratories to help them in the criminal investigation. So, as we are going in the history, how the various laboratories are developing in India, the forensic science laboratories, they all are connected to the Indian independence movement. As the Indian independence movement was rising, the arms were increasing, the ammunition was increasing, the Indians were using that for their freedom rights. So, the laboratories were also opened in the view that all these will be analyzed or examined, whatever firearms are being used by the Indians in the Indian independence movement. So, a scientific section was developed later on in the year 1936 under the CID in Bengal, and facilities were created for examination of bullets, cartridge cases, firearms, etc., which were used in committing crime. Along with that, few other states, they also started scientific sections in their CID, Criminal Investigation Departments, where investigations on footprints, fingerprints, firearms and question documents were also carried out, and therefore gradually more and more branches of science were embraced and the laboratories gained maturity over the years period of time. So, after that, after the Indian independence, we were firstly introduced with the first state forensic science laboratory which was opened in Calcutta. The first state forensic science laboratory in India was established in the year 1952 at Calcutta, but this laboratory became fully operational in the year 1953. The medico-legal section of the Chemical Examiner's Laboratory was also transferred to this laboratory, and by the year 1955, a small unit of physics was established in the West Bengal State Forensic Science Laboratory to deal with various physical examinations of exhibits encountered in crime investigations. During the year 1957, the physics unit developed into a full-fledged physics section. In the same year, the footprint and the currency forgery sections of Criminal Investigations Department were then transferred to this laboratory in the year 1957. But later on in the year 1958, General Chemistry section of the Chemical Examiner's Laboratory was also transferred to this laboratory. Thus, the first multidisciplinary forensic science laboratory came into existence in the country in the year 1958. That was the first state forensic science laboratory of Calcutta, which started in year 1952, but in the 6 years, all the examination departments which were opened separately in different divisions and different parts, or the CIDs under the government of Bengal, they all came together, and what we see today, the forensic science laboratory, the multidisciplinary nature of the forensic science laboratory, the same forensic science laboratory was established in the year 1958, as all the various sections were transferred to this state forensic science lab. Then one institution which was later on developed was the Central Fingerprint Bureau, or also known as CFPB. So, on the recommendations of the Royal Police Commission of 190203, the first CFPB in India was established in the year 1905 at Shimla. This was restarted functioning from 1955 in Delhi under the Administrative Control of Intelligence Bureau, or IB. So, the major role which was there for CFPB was to coordinate the activities of state in tracing or locating the interstate criminals, and in the year 1956, the CFPB was shifted to Calcutta and remained under the administrative control of IB. And further on in the year 1973, it was transferred to the CBI, and during the July 1986, its control was given to NCRB, and then it was again shifted to New Delhi. So, this is how the forensic science laboratories and institutions were developed and formed in India, and how a multidisciplinary lab was formed in the year 1958, which was the first lab to form as the State Forensic Science Laboratory, Calcutta in India for the forensic investigations. Thank you.